It's been a while since I've seen the ground. I'm so used to falling down and getting up, getting back online again.
Thanks for tuning in and checking out this podcast. My name is Scott Corley. If this is your first time tuning in, thanks for tuning in and checking it out. If you are a repeat offender and you want to keep hearing more of these, the biggest way you can help me out is just by sharing it with a friend, anyone who you think might find it interesting or helpful. My email is in the bio and the notes. If you want to reach out and give me some feedback or tell me anything that you'd like to hear more of, I'd love to hear it. Today I interviewed Lori Clark. We had what I think is a really fun conversation about how to best prepare yourself to get hired at an airline. In the coming days, I've got episodes coming out on a variety of topics. The first will be with a coworker of mine who learned to fly up in Alaska. He was a bush pilot for a long time, then a cargo pilot flying CASAs around the state of Alaska. Another interview coming up with a friend who's now opened his third restaurant in San Diego, on what it takes to last and succeed in the restaurant industry. And then upcoming is another one with a friend who is opening up a Chevy dealership in North Carolina. He graduated high school with me. He went straight to the Marines when I went off to college. After the Marines, he started being a salesman at a local car dealership in San Diego. He has worked his way up to being general manager of a couple different car dealerships in San Diego, and now he is finally opening up his own car dealership that he owns in North Carolina, and he's just a blast to talk to, and I'm really looking forward to it. Without any further ado, let's get into Lori Clark. Clark, thank you very much for letting me interview you. Why do people use your business? How do they reach out to you?
Usually people find me through referral, through word of mouth, where I have trained a friend of theirs or an acquaintance or a coworker, and they liked the results, so they referred them to me, and then that person usually sends me an email. And I do most of my communication via email simply because I'm always on the phone.
Okay. So the two people that I know who have used you were very pleased. One used you to get hired with the company that I'm hired with now, and the other one used you to help get hired at Virgin America. I believe both of them contacted you in the phase where they had landed the interview.
Correct.
And is that always the case? Like you wait till you get the interview lined up, then you contact Lori Clark, or are people contacting you at the beginning of their careers just for professional advice?
I get all walks. So I'll get somebody who is just at the very beginning and wanting to understand a little bit of direction because they don't know anybody in the industry. I will get people that are going for a regional position.
Okay.
And depending on their needs, sometimes I work with them, sometimes I don't. Most of my clients are for the majors, and normally they'll contact me either just prior to getting an interview, they feel that one's coming, or they've already secured an interview.
Okay. I saw on your website the list of airlines that you say you help people prepare for, and then there was a list of asterisks where you were a specialist for those airlines. Do you want to go over the list?
Sure. It's not an exhaustive list by any means.
Sure. But
Sure.
lay it on me.
Everybody. That's a tough one to really just narrow down, except for the fact that, I've prepped for just about every airline out there. There are a couple of, one particular exception that I prefer not and won't, and that's Cathay Pacific. I don't
Okay.
know enough about their interview process. Well, I know their interview process, but I don't know enough about the mentality of where they come from. So I don't do prep for Cathay, but I have done preps for Emirates, for example, and some other airlines, Copa, as well as all of our domestics.
Okay. So someone lands their interview with their dream airline job. They reach out to you, and what do you do for them? Like, what's the process? What happens?
I tell them to give up. Just kidding. The process is I have a full course that I take them through that comes in 3 or 4 stages. So first stage is all about fundamentals, back to basics. They get homework to do. Once they've completed that homework, we move on to the stage 2, which is tools, where they learn how to answer questions, how to identify things. Then stage 3 is putting it all together, where they utilize those tools, and I put them through sort of a mock interview, if you will. However, I'll ask a question and we will then talk about it right then and there. It's not a full interview and then come back and talk about it. And then the 4th phase is dependent on the airline. Some airlines are very interested, if you will, or they are very heavy into particulars. For example, FedEx, Southwest, Frontier, they all have an SBI, a situational based interview. FedEx and Frontier call it SBI, Southwest calls it LOI, and it's a 7-minute scenario. It's a mock flight that's timed for 7 minutes, and there's a problem. So the 4th session for those airlines would be focused on just that. Delta focuses a lot on hypotheticals. So I devote one whole session to just hypotheticals, which would be the 4th one for Delta.
Okay. I'm looking at a note that I have from someone who used your services, and his comment, and by the way, this was out of effusive praise for you, was, "She does not pull any punches!" exclamation point. "She makes you study and come up with 3 stories to use for the tell me about a time. She tells you what to do for every minute of the day." And I'm assuming that he was referring to how you prepare yourself before the interview, or was he talking about during the actual interview too? Like how
As far as
the
every minute of the day,
yeah.
I explain the day to them. It's not that I say, okay, you're going to go to the bathroom at 10:42. It doesn't work that way. But I explain the day, what to expect for the day, and really how they should conduct themselves throughout the day while they're on the property.
Okay. How much would you say that you are grooming them to appear as the person that the airlines would want them to appear as, versus helping them groom themselves to just put forward the best version of themselves, which will hopefully then align with the airline? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. The latter, 100%. I believe that they have to see the individual, the real person. That is, in my opinion, the number one mistake that people make in interviews, is that they try to put on a mask and become what they think it is that they want. The problem is that all interviewers want is the real person. Every single airline is looking for the same pilot. They're looking for someone that is competent and that they can get along with.
Yeah.
Every one of them. So the way that I work is help you to understand where the interviewer is coming from, so that you can actually answer their questions and be real, be yourself.
Okay. Cool. Well said.
And you know that the quote is absolutely correct. I pull no punches. When people try to fill me full of flowers, I was going to say BS, but I don't know if this is a family show.
No.
So I call them on it. If somebody's going to try to skirt an answer or completely try to dazzle me with bullshit, no, I'm going to call them out on it right then and there. And I don't pull any punches with them, because an interviewer won't either. Now, an interviewer won't say anything. They'll just make a note of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Back in September of 1999, I interviewed for Great Lakes Airlines. And for Great Lakes Airlines, I had a ton of time. I had like 2,000 hours of time and, a couple hundred hours of sitting in the right seat of a King Air, which, for them was more experience than most. And a guy named Jim Tostenrud was the chief pilot, God rest his soul. And he interviewed me and he said, so why do you want to come to work for Great Lakes Airlines? And this was my only sincere answer of the next three. I go, well, you guys are based out of Denver. I want to move to Denver. I figured maybe it could be a great fit. And he got like visibly agitated. By the way, long story short, I ended up getting the job, but so he gets really visibly annoyed by that. And then he goes, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? And I did just what you're talking about there. I gave him the answer that I thought that he wanted to hear. I was like, well, let's see how this goes. Maybe it's Great Lakes still in 5 years. And then he got really like smoke coming out of his ears, annoyed. And he goes, what are your goals in aviation? And I said, I just want to fly turbine powered aircraft and have a good quality of life. Like, I was afraid to tell him that my goal was to go work for a major airline, because I was afraid. I had this idea formed that like Great Lakes Airlines wanted people to come and stay there for the rest of their career, which I couldn't have been more wrong about. They wanted people to come, get their couple years experience, get their 1,000 hours of turbine PIC experience, and then get the heck out and go get a better job, because they don't want you sitting around there expecting things to get better. And then so there were two BS insincere answers right there. And then the only thing that saved me was my true answer to the next question, which was, do you know anyone who works here? And I said, no, I don't know a soul that works here. And I think that that's what, aside from the rest of the interview going way better than those first couple of questions, I ended up working there, and it turned out being really good. But he said something to me at the end of the interview, which is seriously not like anything that anyone at a career destination airline would say. And I'll give it the let's say the middle school version rather than the full adult version. He just said, Scott, I just want you to remember one thing. I will never, ever give one blank about your quality of life as long as you work here. Which, for Great Lakes Airlines, at least he was honest. Because then through the training process, as we're sitting in a hotel out in Spencer, Iowa for a week, and everyone's like, I can't believe an airline would treat us like this. I was like, well, dude told me he wasn't going to care about our quality of life. But thankfully, the industry has moved forward from the old adversarial type of training situations and hiring situations. And now it seems to be pretty pervasive throughout the industry that everything is so much more genteel than it was even just 20 years ago, as far as attitudes and hiring. And I'm unaware of anyone right now that has an adversarial style hiring going on. Are you?
It happens every now and then, and that's due to individuals. So it does happen every now and then. I haven't heard of it happening in a couple of years now, but several years ago, when the airlines picked up hiring again, there was a very adversarial interview that I think was due to one particular interviewer. I don't know the man, but he was very, very adversarial, and it got under people's skin a lot. sometimes you get people that think they need to play good cop, bad cop, which is, of course, old school and out of date, out of touch. It doesn't get you anywhere. But there are some people that feel they need to. I don't understand why, to be honest. I don't understand it. You get more information out of people if you make them feel comfortable and that you like them, they're willing to share.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can think of is to test whether or not somebody had a short fuse and would explode. And it did work. On certain people, it worked. Now, that same airline, thankfully, knock on wood, to this day, hasn't had that same adversarial approach to it. It's a difficult interview, but it's not as adversarial as it was. But you do get that every now and then, and it's simply because interviewers are human. And so they bring their own ideas, and hopefully they've been trained and they conform to the interview team and operate objectively. But every now and then you get someone who's very subjective and kind of rogue, I suppose. And yeah, they become a little adversarial, a little provocative. And so my advice to people a lot of the time is don't ever bite on that. Don't ever bite, because that may not be that individual. That may not be what he's actually thinking or what his purpose is. So don't bite on it.
And also, you know, you're never interviewing at any airline to be a first officer. You're always interviewing to be a captain. And I mean, not that you should ever lose your temper as a first officer either, but I mean, the greatest thing about this job, being an airline captain, is you get to win every time. Like if you've got gate agents pressuring the flight attendants to like get the door closed, you just get to say to your flight attendant, hey, put it on me. Just tell me what you need. We'll blame it on me. We'll anybody putting undue pressure on you, you get to just go ahead and, be the cool, calm one, because you're going to win. And if you do that calmly, I mean, I've been operating as a captain for mainline size aircraft since March of 2008. And I've never had a phone call more than a, hey, what was going on in this one flight? And that's happened maybe once or twice. And it was never any Monday morning quarterbacking, just, hey, we got a report. So they're looking for more information. And so, and believe you me, I've had plenty of people come at me, whether or not it's, gate agents, rampers, or air traffic control or whatnot. And there's no need to get that stressed out, because you just get to win. You get to have your way.
Absolutely.
And so if you can't show that consistently in the interview, I guess it's why would they then hire you?
You brought up an interesting point there of we don't hire first officers, we hire captains. And I'd like to explore that just a little bit, because it's a line that is very commonly used. And it's true, but what does it mean?
Okay.
And when you stop and you think about what does it actually mean, it doesn't have anything to do with upgrade. It has everything to do with judgment. We don't hire first officers to occupy a seat and read a checklist. We hire first officers that want to learn and have the ability to see the bigger picture so that they can be a functional, contributing crew member and then eventually take over the aircraft.
I love that.
It's an interesting line, because I don't think people really stop and think about what it means.
So one of the questions that I've been asking every pilot that I've been interviewing, but I want to ask you too, because of your closeness to pilots, and we'll go through your background in a little bit, but what, in your opinion, makes a good pilot, a good captain, a good first officer, and a good crew member? I mean, you just spoke to it, but just let me ask the question directly.
That's interesting. It's an interview question, actually. I think the best way for me to answer that is to broaden it into more categories. I see that we've got an exceptional category, a great category, a good category, and an average category.
Okay.
And then, of course, somebody who shouldn't be flying. So if we start at the average category, I think that's somebody who can do the job. If we move into the good category, I think it's somebody who can do the job, that cares about the job.
Okay.
We move into the great category. I think we have somebody who can do the job, who cares about the job, but who's always trying to be better, who's always looking for, how can I do that better? And then the exceptional category, I don't think anybody's in, unless you're Chuck Yeager.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you talk about what makes a good pilot, I really think that if I boil it down to one particular thing, it's somebody who's always looking to improve, always looking to learn something. I firmly believe that we learn something every day, whether it be work related or not. We learn every day, and this day we stop learning is the day we die.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I know that I've learned, I transitioned airplanes at my company the beginning of this year. And back when I was a new captain on the Airbus and 13 years ago, I really focused on, the book smarts, the technical aspects of the airplane, and being borderline pedantic about it. And the thing that I've realized this time around in the transition between airplanes is that, not to diminish the importance of the technical knowledge and understanding we have to have about the airplane and the operation, all that stuff, but I'm not going to become a better captain by focusing solely on that. Like what I'm focusing on now is the interpersonal, and hopefully doing good at it, but that the whether or not you need to correct somebody on them not doing it like you.
Mm-hmm.
If someone must be corrected, how do you say it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Mm-hmm.
how do you do things your way? What's really interesting me is, how to be a better captain is continuing to focus on leadership, or professionalism, camaraderie, that we're doing this in a way that we're going to try to do things as right as possible, as safe as possible. And I include in that, you're not making things as safe as possible if you're pissing off the person next to you, annoying
Absolutely.
them.
You're no longer a team at that point. So I applaud you on really embracing the diplomacy, because there are a lot of people that don't. They'll just bark an order. And perhaps the FO that you're talking to is a little more linear than that, and they won't understand why you're barking an order. So you being introspective to look at how can I communicate with that person differently, I applaud you for that. A lot of people don't. They upgrade and they say, it's my ship and I'm going to do it my way and you're going to do it my way. Well, sometimes there's a time to let it go if it's just a technique. And then there are times to be firm. And then there are times where, okay, this is how the airline wants us to do it. How can I diplomatically tell this person that they're not doing it correctly and yet still embrace them as part of the team and give them the confidence they need? Because oftentimes we forget that they are still looking to you for affirmation.
And also it goes the other way too. Let me think of how I can say this diplomatically. There are people, there are captains out there who, have less of a comfort level at being very diplomatic. let's say. And yet I would still judge them as perfectly competent, perfectly safe, quite often highly skilled. And yet something about their personalities rubs significant number of their flying colleagues in the right seat the wrong way. And it's interesting because like there was this one guy at a previous airline that seemed like half of the first officers couldn't stand to fly with and would no fly him. And then you'd ask the other first officers and they'd be like, it's no big deal. I get him. You know, he just does things his way and, you know, he's the captain. So it's a joint responsibility by both crew members to try to understand the pressure that the other one's under and, you know, give them a break if it can be afforded to not let it totally ruin your day, your trip, or compromise the safety of flight or anything like that. So let's talk about how did you get into doing what you do? And are you a sole one person operation or do you have anybody working with you?
I am just all by myself.
Okay.
It's just me. Every now and then I rope my husband in to help out in a few places, especially if my calendar is really, really full, then he can help alleviate a little bit of the load and take a session for me. So every now and then he does that. But otherwise, no, it's just me, all me.
What does your husband do? I mean, does he just...
He's a captain for a major.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
In the Phoenix area?
Well, we live in Phoenix now, but no, he's not domiciled here, nor is the company here.
Okay, cool. And I understand you have previous experience working in HR.
You know, it's kind of funny because that used to be a real sore spot for me because it's very interesting. I did not work in HR. I worked in flight operations.
Oh, really?
So,
I don't know why I had that impression.
Well, because of what I do. You know,
Okay.
this is HR prep. And we kind of throw that term out generically, HR prep. But actually, no, my boss was the VP of flight ops, and I worked hand in hand with the chief pilot. And so he designated me in charge of interviewing and hiring. So I did that for a long time. It seems like a lifetime ago. And until really the politics got to me. I couldn't take the politics anymore. And I identified what I liked about my job and what I didn't like about my job. And, you know, obviously you think politics online are bad? Go in the corporate office. It's just as bad. But what I loved about my job was I felt like I was helping people. I was opening doors for them. And there was absolutely nothing like when I would make that phone call and say, congratulations, welcome aboard. And I would get a scream in my ear until where I'd have to hold the phone away because people were so elated and just that happiness, that joy, and that relief as well. That made my day. Yeah. I got a lot of gratification out of that. And so that was what I loved about my job the most. And of course, what I hated about my job the most was when I would get the phone call from somebody in tears asking me what they did wrong.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell them. As a representative of the airline, you can't tell an interviewee what they did wrong. It opens way too many potential doors for a lawsuit. So I couldn't tell them. And that was really hard because I was pulling for these guys. And, you know, for many, many years, I've called myself a black sheep in this industry because I am pro-pilot. Yeah. And there are so many that are not. But that was really hard. And so one day it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks that my personality was changing because of the politics in the office. And I thought, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? So I took the best part of my job and the worst part of my job and turn that around so that now I can and do tell people what they're doing wrong. So the gratification and the satisfaction that I get from what I do now is exactly the same as what I had at the airline when I would call people and welcome them. Now, instead, I get a phone call or an email from somebody just whooping it up and, oh, I got it. Thank you. Oh, it's the same exact gratification. And so
That's great.
I love what I do. I've been doing this now for 17 years, and my entire business is built on word of mouth. I haven't spent one dime on advertising.
That's great.
And it's simply because I care. I do care, and I sometimes care too much, where when I have a client who doesn't get the job, the first thing I do is look at me. What did I do wrong? How did I let them down? And then when I get somebody who does get the job, I feel, okay, I did something right.
Great. What do you have a sense of the difference in averages between the people who go through your prep and the people who don't, as far as getting hired at different places? Like let's say if a certain company is hiring 1 out of 3 people in it interviews, do you have any sense of how you're faring against the average?
I have a sense of how I'm faring against the airline average.
Yeah,
but
that's
not
what I mean.
against my competitors. So
Sure. Okay. That's fair.
sure, there's a company that for a long time, they were averaging, I would say, about 35 to 40% higher rate. And my higher rate with that very same company was averaging about 60%.
Okay.
So when I look at that number and I think, okay, it's not 100, but
You're
it's
not gonna.
it's still
Yeah.
higher than the average of what they hire. So I'm okay with it. I'm not happy, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So that's one particular company. Other companies, I can honestly say that, well, I think all of them, I actually exceed what, this sounds like bragging, they exceed what the airline percentage is.
Well, you'd have to have a sense of it, and given that you're in the business to help people, you'd have to want to have a sense of that. And so I don't take it as bragging. I mean, that's just quite merely, it's why you're in the business, so that you can help the people.
Sure.
I remember when I got hired by when I was interviewing with America West Airlines, and I don't know why I never did an interview prep like what you're saying, but what I did do when I got hired by America West is I was told by the woman from the HR department at America West, but for the interviews, she said, listen, I'm not telling you you have to take a sim prep. It is not required. But I am telling you that most people take 2 sim preps before they show up to the interview. And so take that for what you will. And so I paid for 2 sim preps the day before the day before the interview at $400 a piece.
Yeah.
As a tangent off of there, I still remember my partner for those sim sessions was a guy. He was an American Eagle FO. He lived in Phoenix. I mean, I lived in New Jersey and was interviewing for America West Airlines. I just wanted any job in that industry, a mainline size aircraft or higher, and was super excited because this was the desert days of 2004 when only America West, JetBlue, AirTran, and Southwest were hiring. Nobody else was hiring for anything. Everybody had tons of people on furlough, and you felt like it was the cracked piece of the iceberg floating away to the sea, and like you better be able to jump and get onto it, because otherwise you're
you're gonna sink.
Yeah. And this the guy who I was doing the 737 sim prep with because the first part of the America West interview was the sim ride. It was a very specific maneuver. And so the sim prep people flew you the same exact maneuver. They gave you power settings. They told you what the altitude tolerances will be and all this stuff. And the sim instructor said to, my prep partner, he was like, listen, man, I don't know what to tell you, but what happened in here in the simulator twice today cannot happen tomorrow. Like he just, his altitude was all over the place. His heading was all over the place. And, I still, even though it had been 2.5 years since I worked for Great Lakes, I still credited Great Lakes and all the hand flying we did for my ability to fly the sim just fine. But I don't know why the guy didn't cancel the interview, because the guy was sitting there telling him loud and clear, like, this isn't going to pass. And we were all buddy that day. And then the next day he went first in the simulator and he just walked right out of that sim, right past me. Didn't even say hi, just looked straight forward. And it's the last I ever saw of him in my life. And hopefully he's got a good job now somewhere
I'm sure
else.
he went on. I'm sure he went on and
Sure he did
just
fine.
speed bump, and he just got hired somewhere else. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
People do that a lot. I don't know why, but it feels like they think, well, this is just a fluke and I'll do fine at the interview. Or they just hold on to too much hope, or they're too busy looking at, well, if I wait 6 months, look at all the seniority I've lost. I've advised people to postpone their interviews.
Yeah.
Because they weren't ready, or there were issues that they needed to take care of. And some of them did not heed my advice. And it's hard because you see it coming. It's like, this is a problem. This is going to be a problem for the interviewers. So you need to postpone this as long as possible. Yes, you're going to forego however much of seniority, but in the long run, that's a lot shorter time than going in there and bombing the interview. Now you've got to wait a whole year just to reapply.
Yeah.
So I don't know why people do that, but there are some that do, and they know better. They just don't listen to their own little voice.
Well, it's interesting because I'm fortunate enough that I've gotten hired at every airline interview I've gone to. But I had that little voice too of like, hey, why not do some prep? And then this like cynical voice kicks in. It's like, well, I don't need someone to tell me how to be me, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, really, no, you just want the best chance you can have to get hired somewhere. And I don't understand why someone wouldn't take that opportunity. The two gentlemen I know who've used you couldn't be more, emphatic that your service provided value and that you helped them mentally prepare for every aspect of the interview. Because I still, it's almost funny looking back at some of my interviews at how I could just be taken by surprise by some of the most basic questions, like, why do you want to work here?
Right.
It's like,
yes. Yes, I have found that people struggle the most with the simple questions.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, I'm kind of a gregarious guy, and one of the questions that I want to ask you is I want to validate some of the advice that I've been giving to people when they tell me that they're interested in becoming a pilot, or in becoming a professional pilot, because
That's a big can of worms.
I like telling them that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in the industry right now. There's a lot of hiring going on. And let me run this past you, and then we'll see if we keep this in the final production. One thing that I've been telling them, regardless of whether or not they are a white male or not, is I say you should join any and every flying organization that is out there. Like, join Women in Aviation, even if you're not a woman. Join NGPA, even if you're not gay. Join OBAP, even if you're white. Because and go to the conferences, because people don't look at you as an imposter. They look at you as someone who is supporting the cause, and you are supporting their cause. You're helping them raise money by going to the thing, and you're networking. And like, don't view it as like you're some big imposter just trying to get a job. Like, you're someone who's trying to network and help a good cause. What do you say to that?
I don't think that's bad advice at all. I think the networking aspect is huge. You know as well as I do how small this industry really is.
Yeah.
There's no thing as 6 degrees of separation in this industry. It's more like 2.
Yeah.
And things always come back around. So somebody that, as a flight instructor, is your student today might be your chief pilot 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
So I think the networking is incredibly important, and you may develop mentors, and having a mentor in this business, and it doesn't necessarily mean a mentor on how do I fly, but somebody you can talk to is, I think, an area that isn't big enough. I think there should be more. I get phone calls from people, they just don't know who to talk to or where to go to ask questions. And, obviously I steer them to message boards, but it's not the same as being able to pick up the phone and say, who do you think is the best airline? Who do you think is the best airline for me? And so I like the mentorship aspect of it, and I like the networking aspect of it. You make more friends, and friends are key. That's why letters of recommendation have weight. If I want to go to work for your airline and you write me a letter of recommendation, they're going to give that a lot more credence because they already trust you. So by association, they're going to trust me. That's why letters are important. So I think it's decent advice. I would take that one step further, and more than just go to the job fairs. Is there a way for them to get involved? So, for example, when you and I were coming up, everybody would list their associations on their resume and think, well, this is going to get me more points on my score. Well, interviewers have caught on.
Yeah.
And so now, if you have women in aviation listed in OBAP and NGPA and the Asian Pilots Association and the Latinos, I'm going to look at you and say, okay, so exactly what did you do for women in aviation? And how did you get involved with OBAP?
Yeah.
So interviewers have caught on that people are using that as some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Push to make them seem, bolster them. But really, it's going to backfire unless they can get involved somehow.
Like, hey, I volunteer at the local EAA, giving kids rides in airplanes, or I volunteer for.
Well, that's
things
and volunteerism is important to many of the majors, absolutely, and it doesn't matter who you volunteer for. But if you're listing a pilot association like OBAP or Women Aviation, don't just go to the job fair. If you want to list it on your resume, then volunteer to take tickets. Volunteer to hand out nave badges or something, so that you can very much list it on there and also say that you volunteered for them. Then you don't appear like a leech.
What's interesting is that's good advice, and I'll definitely fine tune, the advice that I give to people, because I wasn't thinking about it from a, hey, put this on your resume type of thing. I was thinking about it from a, these are great places to network.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely agree.
that's even better advice from yours. Don't just network, get involved in any of these organizations. Cool.
Yeah.
What else? What else would you offer someone who is maybe just looking at going to a flying college right now as far as overall arc of career advice?
That's interesting. I've always stood by get a degree in something that is not aviation related, so that if something happens in the future, you lose your medical or what have you, that you have something that you can utilize. And you could still stay in aviation. You have a finance degree, great, go into the finance department in an airline. Okay. I've always said that, and I still really somewhat stand by that. However, everything changed with the 1,500-hour rule and the restricted ATP, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they're going to give you more credit if you go to an aviation college. And that's where it becomes difficult because, people don't, once they make up their mind, they don't want to spend 4 years at a college and then start their flying career. They want to do it simultaneously. So realistically, if somebody were looking at going to school now just to get their ratings and become a pilot, I would talk to their friends. I would visit the school, talk to current students. How do they like it? What's the one thing they dislike about it? If they're looking at maybe not just a college, maybe they're just looking at Joe's Flying Service to get their ratings. The biggest thing is to definitely visit the school, listen to their spiel. Now ask for a tour and don't let them skip the maintenance hangar.
Okay.
Absolutely. Walk in the hangar and look at the maintenance hangar. Is the mechanic happy? Is he grumpy? Is there a parts bird in the corner? If you've got an airplane that's in the corner of a hangar that they use for nothing more than just parts, they're cheap. They're robbing parts to fix aircraft to keep them running, and I wouldn't trust them. Look at the floor. Is it clean? Do they take pride in what they're doing? Because if they don't, you're going to feel it too. And I would run far and fast.
Do you have any schools that you can think of, and if you'd prefer to not name any, that's fine, but that offer exceptional value?
Exceptional value.
Okay, let me ask a different question. One train of thought is go to a big name, 4-year school for aviation. And then another train of thought is go to a 2-year college that has an aviation and, get your commercial multi CFI through them, and then just finish up the other 2 years at another state school and be flight instructing on the side and stuff like that. Do you have any?
Well, the big universities, I think are good. I think are good. Again, if it were my preference, I'd rather see somebody get a different degree. But flight safety, Vero Beach is a place that the students that I see come out of there, well, most of them turn on and instruct there as well. But quality, they've been taught very well. So I do like flight safety Vero.
I did my commercial multi-instrument at Flight Safety Vero Beach, and I think that is the only reason why I could go get my CFI from another place, which has many locations throughout the country, but I'll leave them nameless. But I referred to them as the ratings factory because
we all know who that is.
you give them money and they give you the sign-offs for the flight instructor ratings you're about to get. And whether or not you're prepared, that's up to you.
Yes. Yes.
But it was because I had such thorough instruction at Flight Safety Vero Beach that I was able to do that, I think, pretty easily. I really like them. As far as value, I mean, flight safety it's not cheap, but it is good,
Agreed.
That's why I chose it for me, because I'm not the best at picking up a book on my own, or at least I wasn't back then. As far as and the rigorous ground schools that they put you through and the briefing before every lesson, it's certainly not you do your own self-study and then just show up and go fly. It's
Right.
very well prepared lessons.
Yeah. Then they're hard on you. It's not, oh, you'll be fine.
No.
I think students getting involved today, or people just looking to fly today, are timing this brilliantly. The industry, as you're well aware, is cyclical, and we have a correction, kind of like a market correction, every 10 years or so. And as long as we don't have another pandemic, things are going strong right now, and they're not going to let up. We've got retirements due to peak in 2024 or 2025. I can't remember which one it was, but so that's a few years away, and the airlines know it, which is why we have this feeding frenzy right now. But we can't forget history too, because on the back end, we've got the recession, which hit this industry really hard, harder than 9/11, because people didn't have the monetary ability to get into flying. 9/11 impacted that too. So 9/11 kind of sped up the process of the market correction, if you will. And so we saw a lot of flight schools closing, and people were afraid to fly, afraid to learn to fly. And then it came back, and then we got hit by the recession, and it just got worse. But yet the current pilots we have are aging. The baby boomers are aging. And so they're going to be retiring in just a handful of years. And so the pipeline on the back end isn't as full as it used to be. Is there a shortage? I'm going to stop short of saying that. I think there's a shortage of quality. There are plenty of people out there, but the real quality people, I think there might be a shortage there. That's just my personal opinion. And I think that an indicator, if we see the major airlines hiring 95% of the people that they talk to, now we've got a pilot shortage. But it's not the case. It's not even close to it. So that's not the case. The regionals are hurting. Is it because of a pilot shortage? No, I don't think so. I think that there were a lot of factors that created this perfect storm, and legislation was heavily involved with why the regionals are suffering so much. But as somebody who's learning to fly today, they are going to walk through this career and make it to a major in short order, a lot faster than you did.
I know.
It's all because of timing. Timing is everything in this business. And so, I talked to people today that have 1,500 hours, and they're chomping at the bit, and they flight instructed for a whopping 6 months. They're a whole year at their regional. Now they're ready. And it's okay, chill out. You got plenty of time, and you're in a really good position because they've got choices. It's not, if all remains the same, this feeding frenzy was not going to let up for another half dozen years.
That being said, though, I still think that there is that sense of uncertainty, like until you get the job at the big three or the big four or one or two other.
Now you sound like an accounting firm.
yeah, like but is, God, I don't want to say this to put anyone down who's made the choice, but I think a lot of people who get into the industry wouldn't do it if they felt like they were going to get stuck at the regionals for the rest of their life, and so there still is that uncertainty of, how do I make that leap? And or how do I, you know, get my game together to make the leap? And I guess, do you offer that as a service to people? Like, do they ever call you and be like, hey, I'm not getting any bites, you know, I'm sitting here at flying a CRJ 700 now for the last 8 years and I can't get an interview anywhere. Can you help? Is that something that you help with or can help with, you think, or
Yeah,
not?
absolutely. I'll talk to somebody, and I will get emails or phone calls from somebody who's in that type of position, and I'll help try to figure out what's going on here. It's not a service that I offer. I do it for free because, you know, it's okay. This person feels like they're drowning. Let me see if I can throw them a life preserver to figure out what's happening here. And yeah, it happens. It's actually not that common. Usually people already know what's going on, but yeah, I'll talk to them and say, okay, let's break this down bit by bit as to what might be going wrong here. Let's talk about any sort of dirty laundry that you've got in your past. Is that a hang up? Okay, have you done any networking? Because if you haven't, maybe you should have a friend take your resume in to whoever's in charge of hiring and ask them to look at it. And what do they see? Maybe there's a criminal history that they need to talk about, or that is hanging them up, or they don't realize, or maybe maybe it's something just simply wrong with the application. I don't do application reviews, but I do refer people on. I just know my limits there.
Okay.
That's like auditing a logbook. No, thank you. So yeah, I will talk to people that are in that situation, because it's frustrating. I know what it's like to be an island and not know where to turn for any kind of help. So I don't make it a service. No.
Okay. Are you time constrained right now? You got time for a couple more?
No, I'm not time constrained at all.
Okay. Do airing conferences still happen, or are they a thing of the past? Kit Darby.
No, they're a thing of the past. Air
Okay.
Inc. Is defunct as we once knew it. Kit Darby is still alive and kicking, and still doing preps. His focus, best I can tell at this point, his focus is hired for expert witness type of work, as well as career projections, being hired by the airlines when they're in negotiations. The union will hire him to do projections. He's still around, but he does not do the Air Inc. job fairs anymore.
Because my ticket to get hired by America West was through the Air Inc. conference that they had. And that was my first Air Inc. conference that I went to. I remember looking at all the airlines that were going to be there that day. And I had a couple of connections at America West. They were first officers, but one of them was pretty well connected. And I remember, being very calculated because, they make you sit and listen to people talk, including Kit Darby, before you can go talk to the people from the airlines. And you're just, you're sitting there waiting. You're not really interested in anything that these people have to say. You're just there to go make the impression with the airline. And this was in October of 2004 or September of 2004. And I remember everyone dove into line for Southwest. And I had already done the calculus on Southwest, and I was unwilling to go buy myself a 737 type rating at the time. And, just something affronted me about that. Whereas really, like, I don't know, maybe it was a lack of belief that I would have gotten the job, even if I had the 7.3 type rating. I don't know, but I just figured, okay, like, everyone's going for the big shiny thing over here. I'll go hop in line for America West. And I was like third in line for America West. And Tracy, who I spoke with there, she looked at my resume and she goes, hey, listen, because I can see that you meet all of our hiring requirements, you're going to get an application. And every airline does things differently. At America West, the golden key that you needed to unlock a door was getting handed an application. We've decided that we're giving an application to everyone that shows up here today and meets our minimum qualifications. And what was really ironic, like I remember a friend of mine who was also at Great Lakes, he showed up there too, and he turned in his resume and he had all the minimum qualifications, but he didn't get handed an application because his resume didn't show that he met all of America West's minimum requirements. This seems like obvious advice that shouldn't even need to be given, but like, I'm assuming you'll agree with this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like, when you're going to one of these job fairs and you're going to hand your resume to an airline, one, ensure that, you know, the objective isn't career employment at an airline. It's career pilot employment at, you know, with the name of the airline.
Exactly.
Ensure that you have looked at their minimum qualifications and ensure that it is easy to read and legible on your resume that you meet each one of their minimum qualifications.
Yes.
And if you're short on something, I don't know, would you recommend addressing it? Or not?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think that,
Or like, you know, if you're in progress to meet one of the requirements, you know.
sure. It's not going to change how the airline responds. The airline is going to respond with, well, let us know when you meet our mins. So, but absolutely, having been on the other side of that and staring at that long, endless line of people, when somebody gets to the front of the line and they hand you their resume, as the recruiter looking over this resume, you're struggling for something to say.
Yeah.
And you're looking for anything to say on here. So number one, to address what you talked about, I think it's a very sage advice to make sure that all of your information is on there that they require. Absolutely. And secondly, that it is easy to read. That point that you made as well is super important, because as a recruiter who's scanning over resumes, they're going to be looking for pertinent information. They're not going to be reading it word by word. They're going to scan it. And so it really needs to be very easy on the eyes. I see resumes that have bold and italics and underline and bullet points and columns, and it's like, whoa, way too much. That exhausts your eye. So simple, straightforward, easy to find the information is best. It's not, people are under the impression that they need to do something to get their attention, you know, make their name across the top in size 50 font. No, that's not what's going to get their attention. Seeing that person's name over and over and over, that's what gets their attention. Recruiters remember names, not faces, because that's all they work with. Names. So they're going to remember the name. Now, getting back to what we were talking about at that job fair, when somebody gets to that front of the line and they present their resume, I always suggest that they initiate the conversation.
Okay.
And, you know, one of the best things to do is to ask that recruiter what they're looking for, what is it, I would say, what do I need to do to be competitive for you, quote unquote. And I don't care if you're walking up to United Airlines and you hand them a resume that has 12,000 hours on it, you know you're competitive. It's not the point. The point is that once you ask that recruiter that question, it empowers them and they want to help you. And they're looking at your resume, picking it apart now for what can I tell them to improve upon. And lo and behold, what they're realizing is, we want this guy. So I always make the recommendation that the attendee initiate the conversation. Don't just stand there like a bump on a log. Initiate the conversation, because that recruiter is struggling for something to say.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. So, all right, maybe we could have a little fun here.
Okay. Why do I feel you're going to go into a role play?
No. I'm just hoping that maybe you could just share a couple ways in which, and not to laugh at anybody's misfortune or anything, but give me some examples of ways in which people screw up in the process. How do they get it wrong? And are there any more typical ways of people flubbing it than not?
Well, we've already addressed the biggest typical way is to go in there and put on a mask and try to be somebody you're not.
Okay.
You're gonna screw that up. Absolutely. Trying to anticipate what somebody else wants or thinks, there's no way you're going to get that right. So that's the biggest one, is that people are not truly themselves. And something that always comes to mind is this old it's not a saying, but it's something that we've experienced for decades. You think about somebody that you know who is an absolute 100% jerk.
Yeah.
And he got the job. And you're scratching your head going, how did he get it? And then we have this other guy over here who is a stellar pilot, awesome to fly with, just a really all-around good guy. And you scratch your head because he didn't get the job. What's the difference between these two? And I can tell you that the biggest difference is the jerk, he went in there not caring. I don't care what you think of me. Here I am.
Yeah.
And the nice guy went in there trying to be what he thinks they want.
Okay.
That's where that comes from. So that's the biggest thing, is trying to be something other than you. I think the other thing that people screw up is not answering the question. Biggest frustration of an interviewer is when somebody doesn't answer the question.
Okay. So one technique I remember using my last interview was with Virgin America back in July of 2007. And I remember the guy who would then become my chief pilot asking me a question. And he said, tell me about a time when you might have bent the rules to get the job done. And I said, I'm sorry, I really can't think of one, but I can tell you about a time that I didn't, and that if I could have a do-over that I would have. And I was like, do you want to hear that? And he goes, yeah, sure. And then I just remembered that I would follow up with, like, does that answer your question? Like, is that what you're looking for? And so, like, that was a technique I always employed. After I was asked a question and I answered it, I would then follow up with, does that answer your question? Is that what you were looking for? And they'll say yes, or they might say no. Could you expand a little more? And I think that's probably a pretty advisable technique for anyone when you're being interviewed, is, ensure that you're check in and ensure that you've answered the question. Because if they don't feel like they've heard it, you're giving them an opportunity to say, no, you didn't, Would you advise that? Or
I don't think that's a bad technique at all. I would not use it after answering every single question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah.
So
what's your favorite color? Red. Does that answer your question?
Right. Exactly.
No, yeah. I don't mean it like that. But if it's at all gray, if it's
exactly.
at all,
then yes, absolutely. They're human. Talk to them like humans. So I think that's a really good piece of advice, especially if you're unsure of exactly what they're asking. And there's nothing wrong with asking for clarification too. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Type A personalities have a hard time doing that. But it's perfectly fine. It's, call yourself out. That's the ultimate in humility, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
My dad flew for TWA, and I think he told me that, one of his friends who was a chief pilot, like that people would offer him bribes to like hire their sons and whatnot.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
it's amazing the pressure that is put on everyone in the hiring situation, off in a different direction. How do you stay current on knowing what the airlines are looking for? I'm assuming that airline hiring processes are always evolving. So how do you stay up to date?
Through debriefs with my clients.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps me keep my finger on the pulse of mentally, where are the interviewers? What direction are they headed?
Okay.
As well as the logistics of the interview itself.
Say more about that.
Oh, well, for example, several airlines are doing virtual interviews right now instead of in person. And so how does a candidate actually conduct themselves on a virtual interview? And so we go through some basic things, and everybody, probably rolls their eyes going, of course, it's good. But there are some things that are important. Where you place your camera. Make sure that you don't have an AC/DC poster on the wall behind you. or use, worse yet, Farrah in her bathing suit. Certain little things. Logistically, the Delta has changed their interview process recently. It's no longer a multiple day process.
Okay.
So you do all of the cog testing online.
Okay.
And then if you pass that, then you fly to Atlanta and do the in-person and the in-person psych, all in the same day. So that process. So I learn how their processes have changed mainly through my clients. Friends, I've got friends all over the place that, every now and then will drop me a note saying, hey, guess what? Our interview process changed. As well as I'm plugged into news articles, airline updates, blogs, and all kinds of things that will cross my computer. So I try to stay as up to date as possible. But like I said, they're all looking for the same pilot.
Well, it's what's interesting, and I think I get a little sensitive when you say that. Do you know who Ron Nielsen is by any chance?
Why is that name familiar?
Because he's got a degree in psychology. He was an America West, which became an airline, US Air, then American Airlines captain. He ran Fear of Flying episodes, and you can look him up. His name is Captain Ron, but how I came to know him was he would facilitate CRM at America West.
Okay.
And are you familiar with the what's it called? Like the DISC personality profile test? It's like it's a 4-quadrant personality inventory. And when I was a new hire at America West, there were like 50. It wasn't just new hires. It was, or maybe this was at yearly CRM. I forget which, but they had like 55 of us pilots take this personality profile test, which he gave to everyone who came in for CRM that year. And then he had us all go stand in the 4 corners of the room based off of the results of the test. And there were like, 48 guys in one corner, me and 2 other guys in another corner, and then like 1 guy in each of the remaining corners. And that's kind of what sort of like the impetus behind doing this podcast or anything is, just recognizing like, okay, I'm a little bit different than your average. The average pilot is the type A, totally linear thinking. And I do have type A linear thinking, but I'm also somewhat creative. And Ron's explanation for what corner of the room everyone was in, and he said, obviously there's broader things or more particular things about each individual's test result, but to speak very broadly, the big corner that every person in the room was in was that they thought that the world was a bad place, but that they had power over it. Whereas I thought that the world was a good place, but that I had power over it. And then the one dude in each other corner of the room where, they thought that the world was a bad place and they had no power over it. And then the other guy, he thought it was a good place, but he had no power over it. And I don't know what the validity of that is from a psychological perspective, but just that, I'm in the smaller group of pilots that doesn't see the world as an inherently, bad place that I need to be putting my control over it. I see it as a good place that I'm going to try to exercise my control over. And hopefully I'm not being too naive about that. But so I'm a little sensitive when you say that they're all looking for the same pilot, because I feel like there are certain aspects of the pilot world that wishes that, they were all the dudes in that one corner, and interestingly, the guitars behind me are kind of a little bit of rebelliousness, because it's kind of speaking against some of my good friends who would say things like, oh man, you don't be the guy who carries the guitar along with you, on the trips, because, no one likes those guys, which is not true. We're just more fun.
I agree. So that's not what I mean at all. Actually, what you're talking about is personality differences based on a personality test. What's interesting about that is that your personality test can be skewed depending on how you answer the question. If you're answering the question from the perspective as a whole person, it's going to be a different answer than if you're answering it as an employee.
Okay.
So there is that, but personality is what you're describing here. And what I'm really talking about is the conglomerate of personalities. Can I sit next to you for 4 days and not want to strangle you?
Yeah.
And then the other side, the competence side, is, can I trust you in my airplane? Not if, but when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So to clarify, that's what I mean.
Okay. I like that.
And there are a lot of guys in your corner. There's more than just a few. I've talked to many who have a creative side. And ironically, a lot of them are musicians.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Or our mutual friend who we were just talking about before. I think that it is so cool, but also very courageous that he's willing to put a comic out there. Like, because it's to start this podcast, actually, I was really afraid for a very long time. It was something that I really wanted to do, but I had this I don't know if it's fear of imposter syndrome, but also I could hear the critics speaking loudly in my head of, oh, don't do that. Don't go on and talk about this. No one's going to care about that, whatnot. And I kind of feel like when you work in a profession full of type A linear thinking people, it's really hard, or it's really easy to give too much credence to those types of voices. But yeah, there are a lot of creative types in this industry.
You're absolutely right on the fear. It is real, and it's not wanting to expose yourself and then have somebody to cut you to shreds just for the sake of cutting you to shreds, and it happens all over the place. So I'm happy that you're doing this podcast. You're doing it for you, and that's the important part. Is you've got to have fun in whatever you do in this world, or it's just not worth it. You've got to enjoy your job. Otherwise, it's just a job.
Yeah, and
I went through the same things, and well, not as much as I used to, but the the challenges, and I mean by not my own personal speed bumps, but the challenges from people challenging me directly.
Okay.
You don't know what you're talking about. It's very interesting, because then what sets in is what you were describing as far as the imposter syndrome. It's like, okay, what am I doing here? Am I faking it till I make it? Is that what this is? Your own fears start to settle in, and it's I think, for me and my experiences with exactly what you're describing, I had to take a step back and say, why are they feeling the need to attack me? And it's something, a deficiency within them.
Yeah.
If it's not a deficiency and you want me to prove something, well, then just flip and tell me.
Yeah.
But it happens a lot, I think, all over the place. And it happens a lot with type A personalities. I don't mean to pick on type A that way, because I'm type A too, but
Oh, so am I. Major.
You wouldn't be in this profession truly if you weren't. There are very, very few that aren't, but that's part of it. Is nobody likes to be called out.
No. And that's actually a huge thing for me that I've been trying to work on. I'm just aware that I can say things so easily that observations just roll off my tongue so easily that I don't realize are like daggers going through the hearts of people.
Ditto.
So, hey, I think you just touched on this, but I want to be more direct about it. When you were starting this business, did you go through a phase of like questioning, like, can I be of value? Am I really helping these people get hired by the airlines? Is my advice going to be worth the money I'm charging people? Was imposter syndrome back at the beginning of your private business a big hurdle for you to overcome?
In all honesty, it still happens.
Okay.
It still happens. So yes, it was a very big hurdle, because how do you earn someone's trust that doesn't know you? And again, there are times now that I even question that. Am I really helping? And usually it's when somebody doesn't get the job, is when that happens. Or I'm having a really hard time getting through to somebody, which is pretty rare. But I step back and question.
Okay.
Am I really helping? And how to be accepted, if you will. I think the acceptance part was a struggle for many years early on, being accepted for what it is that I have to offer, what I'm trying to do and accomplish. It was really hard. It was really hard. It was a struggle to keep going, but I did. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and I'm not going to give up on this, because I know what I'm talking about, and I know that I want to help. So if those people that want help, great, they'll call me. Those that don't, I don't need them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something I struggle with today. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think any consultant who does what I do, if they don't feel that right now, they're not worth their salt.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, it seems only natural, because you're building this connection. You're trying to help someone achieve most of the time their dream job and unlock their dream life. Living the dream.
Living the dream, baby.
But that you have to be constantly reevaluating and self-assessing. and because, I mean, like you just told me, you're getting the feedback on what's going on in the interview process by what your clients are telling you that they just experienced. How often do you get hit with something like, ooh, that's a total new one that came out of left field? I wasn't expecting them to throw this new thing at you. How often do you get feedback like that? Or do you get
a new process or a new question?
Answer it any way you like.
Not very often. Interview teams tend to stay the course.
Okay.
And it's all dependent on who's in charge. So we don't really find any major shakeups in the interview process or the questions unless there's a changing of the guard.
Okay.
Or a pandemic.
So the pandemic really slowed down the business, huh?
Stopped
completely. Yeah, no one was
Absolutely
hiring.
stopped. Yeah, I was completely swamped, and March 18th was my last day of work. I had zero from that point on until mid-March of this year.
And are things in full swing or just picking back up pretty well? Where are they at with you right now? Swamped?
Well, this is my day off.
Okay.
And I'm spending it with you. No. No, it's incredibly crazy right now. We went on a little mini vacation in March, and my phone started ringing. It's like, wow, where'd this come from? And so I started, booking people, and I was actually working with them as we're driving down the road. And it hasn't let up since. It has been incredibly busy. I finally figured out that I need to go in and block my own days off, or I'm going to screw myself, which really has happened over the last several months. I was probably averaging about 4 or 5 days off a month.
Wow.
And then now this month I got smart and I booked all my days off for 1 month. And so I actually have 8 days off.
It's fabulous.
You remember what that was like at the regionals, right?
Not even Great Lakes gave me 8 days off. I think I had 10. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
I should be so lucky. So it's been incredibly, overwhelmingly busy. And apparently I'm not the only one. Clients call, or potential clients will call and say, how is your calendar looking? Because I understand everybody's full. So it is fair to say that we are in full swing, and we came out of the gate swinging. It was not a slow thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh boy, okay, my calendar's already overflowing, and not everybody is hiring yet. They will be hiring very shortly.
Yeah.
and so it's okay. I'm not sure where I'm going to fit them into the calendar, but yeah, it's crazy.
And most of your work is via email, or how much of it is it like talking like this?
Oh, like this. I do. I do Zoom with them.
Okay.
And sometimes we're face to face, and sometimes we're not. If I'm showing them a PowerPoint, then we're not. But yeah, I'll do Zoom calls. Okay.
I'm intrigued to know, given that I was a Virgin America hire, how different did you consider the Virgin America hiring practices versus the rest of the industry at the time?
I didn't, they didn't strike me as being vastly different at all.
Really?
Mm-mm.
That's interesting because, we were quite often told that they were trying to hire a slightly different breed of pilot who maybe had a little bit more personality, who would be a little bit more guest forward, be willing to make announcements in front of the passengers and whatnot. But from your way of looking at it, you don't view that Virgin America was doing anything radically different in the realms of hiring?
Not radically, no. I agree. I think that they were much more personality focused. There are some classic Virgin questions that are still out there running around. Why should we hire you over the other people here? No, that was a classic Virgin question. Yeah. And that is what you're describing as far as the personality style of the airline is right there in a nutshell. Right there. You can see it. I think one of the best answers I ever heard was one of my clients was the very last person to go. So he'd been standing around all day long chatting with everybody else there. And he went in and they asked him that question. And his response was, I've gotten to know all these people out here all day long, and they're all fantastic. I think you should hire us all.
That's good. That's a good answer.
Yeah. The point isn't, are you arrogant? And that's, I think, what they were trying to filter out is the arrogance. So, but as far as radically different, no, just the airplanes were radically different.
Yeah. The mood lighting. Okay.
So,
is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap it up?
Boy, I don't know. You think we're going to be seeing commercial aircraft that are driven by somebody sitting in a room in Las Vegas?
That's an interesting question. And the answer I always give is it will not happen, at least until you have a generation of children who were sent to their soccer practices in driverless cars.
Mm.
I know that the big wigs at Airbus have told the airline industry, hey, we're ready to go right now. We got the technology together. We don't need these pilots. Obviously, I think it's always better to have someone with skin in the game on the airplane. It's just, I believe in that part of the marketplace. Things can fall to crap if someone doesn't have skin in the game. Now, maybe someone sitting in a remote area might still feel like they have skin in the game, but I don't think it's quite the same because, quite frankly, I don't fly safely just for the guests on my plane. I fly safely because I'm on it and I want to come home and see my wife and kids.
Yep. I 100% agree with you. I think it's fantastic. The analogy here of a generation of children going to school or to soccer practice in a driverless car. I think you're absolutely spot on the money with that. It's the trust. It's the trust factor.
Yeah.
And currently every single person on this planet will have to have the trust factor of who's up front.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And it'll also be interesting to see how they handle delivering of packages. If they're going to use drones to deliver packages and they break all the time, we might have a setback.
Yeah.
So
I know that the military has claimed that the reliability and safety of their drones is greater than their manned aircraft fleet. But then you're relying on government data and assurances for that. And it's like, I agree with you. We'll get to see this in the cargo world. Probably,
yes.
Possibly. Apologies to any of my friends at FedEx or UPS who are listening to this. Or they'll be the first to go single pilot versus dual pilot or whatever. It's really hard to predict in an event horizon. And I don't think that you're going to get honest answers from many pilots when you ask them what whether or not they think that unmanned airplanes are possible, because, you know, you get into the whole people answer in a certain way because they don't want to give an answer that's going to skew the public perception.
Mhm, mhm,
Do you know what I mean? Like,
mhm, mhm,
you toe the party line.
mhm.
Airplanes are always going to need pilots. Always.
Well, they are. They just whether or not you're sitting in the airplane is the question. And
No,
truthfully, I as a passenger would want somebody. I want a human up front that's got the skin in the game, like you said, because there are things that somebody in a dark room in Las Vegas will not hear, will not feel.
Yeah.
That you would. And so for that reason alone, I wouldn't set foot in a drone.
Do I think in the year 2700 that whatever the mode of transport to get from New York to San Francisco is going to have a pilot on it? No, probably not. But to me, the reasonable question is, you know, if my kids chose to become airline pilots, will they have full careers? I think the answer is probably yes.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more changing in the industry. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen a lot of morphing already, but I think we're going to see more changes for sure. But as far as commercial passenger flying, no, it's still going to be a human pilot up there in the front of the airplane. Now,
Well,
we might have more psychological testing done.
Interesting. Maybe. I, as we have seen throughout the last century, we will see increased layers of automation for sure.
Sure.
You know, but
I think we're going to do away with rampers long before we do away with pilots.
have you ever heard of wheel tug?
Wheel tug, you said?
Yeah, it's
No, I haven't.
electric. There's a company called Wheel Tug right now, and they are developing a electric driven nose wheel. They replaced the nose wheel on the 737s, and they're also going to get going on the Airbus 320 soon. And you will not need a tug for pushback, and they're going to have cameras mounted all over the airplanes so that hypothetically, you know, when the regulatory authorities catch up, you won't even need marshalers. You'll just be able to, you know, put it in reverse, taxi out, taxi forward, go without even starting an engine on the ramp. And so, you know, you're going to see a lot more automation like that.
I've always wondered why they never did that. I mean, we've got car washes that have been around for decades, where you pull in, you put your wheel in the little conveyor thing, and it just automatically takes you through the car wash. Why haven't they done that at airports?
You know, it's interesting. That's a totally different concept than what I was just saying, but that's an interesting concept. Hey,
We have a
you
new
should
business.
you better patent it right now so that when whoever does that, you get to collect your coin. But really, I think that this if you follow Wheel Tug, I think they're taking off right now. In fact, the only thing that they lack is commitment from an American airline, from a US based airline. They've got commitments from KLM,
Interesting.
all sorts of carriers all over the globe. Just no one yet, I believe, in the United States of America. This has been really, really fun. I've really enjoyed this. Yeah. And I hope that we can do this again sometime in let's say the medium range or something. And like, if you ever think that you've got fun updates that you think it'd be fun to have a conversation about and put out to the public, you know, especially those who are seeking employment in the industry, I'd love to do it again.
I would too. I've had a lot of fun doing this, and fun updates. I'll have to put my thinking cap on for that one.
Well, and that's just it. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Sean you've seen his comic, obviously,
Mhm.
but he's also got a website called Airline Files,
Oh, yes.
and he hasn't done much lately. But I know his vision was that we, have a sort of central place for kind of cool,
Mhm.
aligned creative interests. And so, if you have any ideas that could be fun things
All
that
of
we could
my
do,
clients go to that website. I send every single one of my clients to that website for
files.
research. Yep, for research on their airline, and have been doing that since its inception.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Well, I believe in what he's done, and uh, he he's meticulous in that he wants to make sure the information is correct. So I send all my clients there happily.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Lori, thank you so very, very much. This has been great.
Thank you, Scott. I've really had a great time today. It was really good to meet you, and I'd love to do this again sometime.